one of the things that stood out about this specific case as I was reading this, and there's real relevance with leadership that we talk about. Leaders are about, not just planning and developing a strategy, but also to be able to, anticipate risk that no one knows about and be able to react when something like that happens, right? So I look at this case specifically, Run DMV, when I read about this, what really stood out for me is that this is not, I mean, here you are, you were trained, I would say your training ground was San Juan, and your true introduction to UC World was the stock exchange. And when I think about the transition from that into the Run DMV, this is a truly dangerous situation. One of the things that I look at the way you depict it in the book, it's and my takeaway in that was there is no substitute for preparation, prep work. I mean, a books or a movie is the end product that we, as as viewers and our audience, we get to enjoy the end product of a glorious life of an FBI agent. What people don't get to see that how much preparation that goes into this. So one of the things that you did a very good job describing, here you are, your first meet at the Run DMV, right? You're showing up with you engineered this well engineered persona of Mark Ruskin. What was your name? Alex Perez in this character?
That's right.
And here you are, you're driving this Miami-Dade license plate Mercedes Benz. You have your chauffeur who looks like an assassin.
A bodyguard.
Your bodyguard. He opens the door. He's looking left and right to making sure it's safe before he opens the door for you to get out. That entire persona that you engineered for weeks and months of planning, from the time you actually meet the subject, and this is what makes or breaks a case, right? And this is the true trait of a leader, like the amount of time that you invested and committed to create that persona that immediately gave you the access to the subject, it empowered you to gain his trust or her trust, because it looks like there was a multiple subjects in that establishment in Morris Avenue, right? When you walked in, there was several individuals, right?
Right. That was a place that was called, and I don't know if it still exists anymore, Holy Land. And the owner, Mahmoud, we knew that he was producing these kind of documents. In his case, I think it was for known terrorists. And as you refer to the leadership type of aspects of this, one of the, in addition to preparing, meticulous preparation, part of it is knowing your target. So in the corporate settings that you're talking about, you have to know your client and really get to know the client and your competitors.
Absolutely.
Really well. So there's a parallel here in that the more you know and study the target and prepare, the much higher the likelihood of success. And if in my case, I would have, like, as you mentioned, a vehicle, a car with Miami-Dade license plates. Now, in those days, Miami-Dade was the capital of cocaine trade. So even though the car maybe had never been south of Brooklyn, it appeared to be from the capital of the drug trade. And I had long hair, I had a ponytail, I had gel in my hair. I'd have gold bracelets and necklaces, which I'd obtained from FBI headquarters. They had been seized from criminals and issued to people like myself, undercovers. But with the look and the vehicle, when someone didn't know me, a subject didn't know me, when I showed up, before I even opened my mouth, I was 90% of the way home. I mean, they already had formulated an idea of who I was and what I was, and then it was just a question of not tripping on myself as I established the relationship and gained their confidence. So, that and learning to think quickly on one's feet and to be able to independently make decisions other type of qualities which yeah, would also apply in a leadership type situation, can be taken uh, from this unusual world of undercover operations. You can draw a lot of lessons which apply in the everyday world of a lot of your viewers, I would suggest.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So, which is a good segue. You mentioned that thinking fast on your feet, which kind of brings me to the next example. This situation where I think weeks and months of planning went into this meet, and here you show up. You have a plan. You know the subject. You know exactly what you're gonna say, the introduction and all that, looking good. And within the first 60 seconds, the subject completely flips out. This person, apparently he was in federal prison for past crime, and he assumes immediately you're a police officer. And he immediately rejects it. He goes, no, 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 I'm not dealing with this guy. He's a police, yeah, right? Police. And here you are. This is one of the things that really I liked about this specific case was that every leaders, you have to be able to not only anticipate that something could go wrong, but it's not just knowing that something could go wrong, also have the ability to react and address the challenge at hand. And I think you demonstrated that very well. I mean, as I read about this, I'm like, this case is done. This entire planning is completely finished. You have nothing to do at this point. Just get back in your car and go back to your New Rochelle office at that point. But you did something completely opposite. Here, this subject is screaming, pointing at you, saying this guy is a cop. So I'm going to pause. Why don't you walk us through what did you do?
But this was a situation that has a few interesting aspects to it when you review it. It took place in Washington Heights, in the Dominican part of Upper Manhattan, and I was traveling there with a confidential witness. Someone who's someone who's uh, working essentially in a covert capacity with me, and he was going to introduce me to this subject for a new investigation who was involved in a variety of criminal activities. Specifically what they were doesn't matter, but he was involved in some dangerous stuff and a lot of illegal stuff. And we were driving up. At the time, I think it was a red Jeep Cherokee, was my undercover car. So we pulled up on, I think it may have been St. Nicholas Avenue up in the Heights, and we saw this guy standing on the sidewalk waiting for us, and he was a heavily built, strong-looking guy with a big beard and kind of a tough-looking character. And we pulled up, and the CW, cooperating witness, was sitting next to me. He got out of the car to talk to the subject, whose name has left my mind years ago. But the guy took one look at me, and he's almost panicked, and he waved the CW to come around uh, the corner to a side street to talk with him without me being present. So I stayed in the car, or actually stood on the sidewalk next to the car for a few minutes until the CW came back. And then he said to me, he said, "It's over. I won't have anything to do with you." What do you mean? Yeah, he won't deal with you because he just spent 5 years in Attica, which is a heavy-duty maximum security New York State prison. So he just was released, and he's very worried. He doesn't want to go back to jail, and he won't deal with you. He says he's a white guy, probably a cop, and he just won't have anything to do with you. Now, as a side note, in New York, if you spent 5 years in prison, you must have done something very serious,
Correct.
because they don't send people for 5 years to Attica for shoplifting.
Correct.
It has to be some kind of major crime, probably of a violent nature, and probably involving weapons. So the guy was still around the corner. He hadn't come back. And I said to the CW, I said, I'll talk to him. W says to me, no, he won't talk to you. He just won't have anything to do with you. I said, let me talk to him. And the CW says, no, you don't get it. The guy doesn't want to won't deal with you. You stay with the car. I'll talk to him. So I walk around the corner and I see the guy standing 5, 10 feet down the side street. And he sees me and he looks at me like startled, like he didn't expect me. He was expecting maybe the CW to come back to say, we're going. So he sees me and I start yelling at him. And I very aggressively in Spanish, I start to yell at him. I said, how dare you not talk to us? How dare you not talk to me? I spent 2 hours to get here from Brooklyn and you don't even show me the respect to even talk to me? What am I supposed to make of that? I mean, I've never been so insulted in my life for such a total lack of respect. And the guy started to become very defensive. And he says to me in Spanish, he says, oh, no, you don't, no, I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't realize, I thought you were white.
I thought you were white.
Yeah. I said, okay, look, I won't take it personally. I'm not insulted, but let's move forward now. And then he came back with me and with the CW, and now he was my best friend. I mean, he couldn't do enough for me now, as in terms of criminal activity. He was willing to engage in any kind of activity that he was already engaged in, but with me now. And we developed a great relationship, and the case went forward, and we were involved in a lot of illegal deals. But the thing, again, some of the lessons are that first, not accepting the situation as it appeared on the surface, but willing to make changes to react to an unexpected situation in such a way as to be able to pull success from the jaws of defeat. And also, is there something about perception? What is ethnicity and what is race and what to what extent is it just a question of perception and preconceptions? He had preconceptions about who's a police officer and who's Hispanic and not Hispanic, and it showed that it's not as simple as it seems.
That's terrific, Mark. That is something, I as I listened to it, as I read the book, it's truly amazing that you would take such this fast thinking. I mean, here you are. I mean, you clearly know this guy. I mean, before even you showed up to this meet, you knew exactly what his background was, why he was in prison and all that. So you knew the type of person he was. So what was going through your head? Were you not even worried that because now you're moving away? Because back in the days, a lot of people don't realize, and you talked about it very in detail in your book, that surveillance was not always there. So you don't really have a backup. Here you are walking away, you're meeting the subject. There's always that risk thing could go wrong. Thing could go I mean, he could turn around, he could attack you. He might have had a weapon on him, whatever. So none of those things crossed your mind at that point?
Well, you know, part of it, the thing, one of the characteristics of being involved in an undercover operation is when the media is actually going down, at least in my case, the adrenaline is pumping so hard, and I'm so focused that I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say, what I'm doing. I'm not. There's no luxury to be kind of contemplating more than just a moment. Afterwards, on the way to a meet, I might be thinking about what's going to happen, what I'm going to do. I might be scared. It's not like in the movies where you're fearless. I mean, I often felt fear, and also distinguishes, the kind of job like being in law enforcement or being in the military, where you could get killed just doing your job. Is very different from other types of work, and certainly one can feel fear. The thing about fear is not letting it control you or control the situation, but being able to cope with it and work your way through it. I'd go to meetings with drug dealers. I'd be thinking to myself, am I out of my mind? What am I doing here? I must be crazy. I must have rocks in my head. But I'd still, once the meet starts, the fear is gone, the adrenaline takes over. And so in that kind of situation, it's just adrenaline, and I'm just doing what I have to do to make it work and to get through it in one piece. And then afterwards, if it went well, then there's a kind of the feeling of satisfaction of having met a difficult situation and come out of it in one piece.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it also humanizes you, right? Because when we think about Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone, and it looks like that he's a tough guy, and he was a tough guy as an FBI agent. He was a tough guy when he was playing as a mobster. But the fact that you say that, you mentioned it twice, back in Puerto Rico, your anxiety, you're not able to sleep, and how you're facing your fear. And in this instance here, you recognize the risk, but at the same time, you're training, and your blood is rushing at that point, and you want to see it through. You want to get the job done, right?
Right.
And nonetheless, I'm sure all your safeguard within your own head I'm sure it was already in full gear.
Right.
You were already thinking if something does go wrong, I mean, how you will react. I'm sure you had your game plan, right? So the next thing, Mark, that I think of as leaders, so we've done full session on leadership, and there are industry full of leaders. There are a lot of superb leaders that really care for their people. They do the right thing, high integrity, and those are the model that I talk about a lot. But also there are also a lot of leaders. They're very self-serving, right? The next story that I'm going to bring up, this actually shows the kind of leader you are. You're truly selfless, and you will do the right thing under any situation, under any circumstance. You always do the right thing, and this is you. And it really jumps out in this story. This incident, I'll let you talk to this, where you had and I believe you were working as a legal attaché in Argentina. What was the capacity you were in Argentina?
Well, I was assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina,
Correct.
as what the Bureau calls an assistant legal attaché.
Okay.
Responsible for liaison. This is at the point where I was not doing undercover work. I took what turned out to be like I'm not, was it maybe 7-year hiatus from undercover operations and working overseas primarily, and in a overt capacity, which was very interesting as well.
And nonetheless, I mean, I know you had a lot of fun. We talked about it a lot in great detail. But in this specific incident, you take a tremendous personal risk to save lives of a family. So, and I know that a lot happened as a result of that. And this is a true trait of a leader, that you're doing the right thing at the risk, at a great personal and professional risk. So why don't you just kind of walk us through that incident, specifically what happened?
I'll tell you the story. Just switch back before I forget for a moment. You mentioned surveillance. In those days, there was no surveillance. I was alone on the street with the CW, or sometimes with another agent, but we were on our own. If anything went bad, it would be there was no cavalry to come to the rescue.
This is dangerous. I mean, this is at the same time when there was the high profile killing of the DEA agent around that time, right?
Right. This was just a couple of years later.
Correct.
Now the case agents have to write an op plan, and it has to be approved, and the legal department has to approve it, and every level has to approve it. There's no spontaneous UC meets like there were often in my day, in the first phase of my UC ops. But moving forward now to Argentina, the agents who assigned, the FBI has about, I don't know how many it is. At the time, it was about 70 officers in different countries based in U.S. embassies. and they're very small. Usually, sometimes it's one or two agents and a clerical employee, professional support staff. Sometimes, in case of London or Mexico City, there's a few more. But when I was assigned to Buenos Aires, and we were responsible for Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and we often travel to those different countries. And we were also authorized to carry firearms in because of the risk situation down there. One afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, I was driving off duty to my residence in Martinez, a suburb of Buenos Aires, on the major thoroughfare called Libertador, which was 2 lanes each way, each direction. And I was stopped at the red light, and there was in the lane in the more to the middle, not the one by the sidewalk, and I was the number 2 car from the traffic light. And I'm thinking to myself, it's late afternoon. I'm thinking about what wine I'm going to open when I get home, and what film to put on the VCR. In those days, we watched tapes. When a motorcycle, large red motorcycle, pulled up by me on the left, stopped in front of the car, next to the car, in front of my car, and that car had a family inside. It looked like there was the father driving the car, and then the kids in the back, and a woman in the front passenger seat. And I didn't think anything of it until the passenger on the motorcycle got off the motorcycle, took out a large large pistol, and was pointing it at the head of
the father,
the
driver.
driver of the car. So it was a moment of, what do I do? This guy is perhaps about to get killed. I don't know if it was an assassination or a robbery, but a robbery it's not unusual in the robbery for the robber to shoot one or more people in the car. What I did do was, the next thing, I drew my pistol, and there was to cut to the chase. There was a shootout. The way the shootout took place was that there was a moment. It was maybe a moment that's erased from my memory. I remember opening the door, pointing as we've been trained, using the frame, the engine of the car,
Yep.
and the frame as cover, as protection. So I was pointing the gun, through the crack between the open door and the windshield. And then the next thing I know, the passengers back on the motorcycle, they're making a U-turn, and I'm making a U-turn at the same time. I'm left-handed, so I have the pistol in my left hand, and I'm turning the steering wheel with my right hand. And then my car comes to a stop with the right wheels, front and back, on the sidewalk. And I'm observing the motorcycle right in front of me, and the passenger on the motorcycle turns around, stretches out his arm, and fires
Towards you.
towards me. Yeah,
Okay.
fired at me, and then I fired back towards him. So that was basically the shootout. And then after I fired, all of a sudden the driver of the motorcycle just put the throttle on high. I guess he must have realized
He may die at this point.
So he accelerated very rapidly, and they took off. And the police, the local
Argentine
provincial
PD.
police,
Okay.
yeah, because there's federal police and provincial police. But at this point, we were in the province, just outside the capital. So the provincial police showed up. But also, I called a friend of mine, Fino Palacios, who was the number 4 of the national police of Argentina and in charge of the anti-terrorism, a big shot. And he came right away. He lived nearby. I figured it'd be helpful for me to have
Some
uh,
local, heavy
so
hitters.
yeah, and I identified myself to the police when they showed up. But when they did a crime scene, they were looking around. They found something which was critical, which was the magazine from the guy who shot at me from his pistol was on the ground. It had fallen out of his pistol,
Okay.
and it was fully loaded.
Oh, wow.
So, and the significance didn't strike me until the next day, and we'll see if it strikes your viewers. But my thought at that moment, and I was a little shaken up. I mean, I never fired a handgun outside of a range up to that point. My thought was, well, at least now they have his. It was a different caliber too. His was a 9mm pistol, and mine was a 40 caliber, which is a different, larger round. My thought was, well, at least now this corroborates my version, and it shows that they had a weapon, and also perhaps they get fingerprints from it. And it wasn't until the next day that the true significance of finding the magazine came to me while I was recounting at the embassy. The DEA also has an office, and I was friendly with the DEA agents, and they were asking me what happened, and I told them the story. And then it occurred to me for the first time that whatever caused that magazine to drop out of the pistol, if it hadn't dropped out of the pistol, he could have fired like 15 or 16 rounds into my
Absolutely.
windshield. The only reason he fired one round is because that's the round that was already chambered
That's right.
in the slide. And then when he went to pull the trigger afterwards, there was no more magazine in his pistol, so there was no more bullets for him to shoot at me. So that was the miracle. I don't know if it was my father up above or our father, but whoever was responsible for that is the reason I can be here telling you these stories today and these lessons that what must have happened was, from a mechanical point of view, is either the magazine wasn't properly seated in the first place, so it fell out, or he may have squeezed the release inadvertently, and then it fell out. But for whatever reason, he only fired one round, and that round missed me, and I didn't get 15. It was a 19-round magazine, so he could have fired. Could have just kept shooting until the gun was empty.
Listen, it might very well be your father protecting you that day because like you said, what are the odds of that magazine falling off? I mean, that would have changed the entire equation at that point, right? And
Right.
if he was shooting 15, 16 rounds, I mean, you would have gotten lucky, right?
Some
So
of the
no, it's
rounds were
bound to hit you,
yeah.
right? So no, this is amazing. And I'm grateful that you're here, how things turned out. Um, but the lesson here is this shows your character, right? I mean, a lot of folks in law enforcement, especially when you're in a foreign land, they're not going to just go out and discharge their firearm in a foreign country. There's a lot of risk involved in this, right? Um, and here you saw that this family is about to be killed. There were children in the car. You had an option. Your option would have been just observe the crime and later be a witness to this, but you chose the most riskiest one to protect the lives of these people. Why did you do that, though? Why did you make that decision? Because I'm sure a lot of people would have chosen the option one.
Yeah, I know some of the people I think who would have chosen the option to sit on their hands and do nothing. Uh, I think it was instinctive. It was like what went through my mind was, oh shit, what do I do now? And then my wiring took over, and I did what I had to do. And in retrospect, I think I guess you think very quickly in a situation like that, or you freeze, one or the other.
It was a split second decision because you saw the firearm being pointed to the driver and you instantaneously you reacted. So it was
Right.
not like you had a
Right.
moments to think about it.
No, but I think times like that, I think you think a lot more than you realize your capacity of your brain to accelerate is something we don't realize because it doesn't happen very often. But in retrospect, I realized that had I not done anything and had one or more people in that club been killed, that's something I would have had to live with, every day for the rest of my life. I mean, it couldn't be undone. Once it happened, it would have been irrevocably, the decision's irrevocable. And if someone had died as a result of my cowardice, that's how I would perceive it, my failure to do the right thing, then I think that would have been pretty tough. And so, I did what I had to do.
Mark, we're friends for a reason. For 3 decades of friendship, you're not just a friend, you're like a brother to me. I mean, you've been there for me always, and I'm truly grateful to get to know you. And you've been not just a friend, but also a mentor. I've learned a lot from you over the years, and I genuinely believe, having you as a friend. The book came much later in life, but we talked about a lot of the stuff, right? And I think it also helped me a lot. So in that regard, do you have any question for me before we?
But one thing that occurs to me, you've read the book, you've read it perhaps from a different perspective than other people who may read it. I have another friend of mine who read it. He bought it and he read it over a weekend. He said he started reading it and he just couldn't stop reading it. And he said that what made it particularly interesting for him was, and perhaps for you also, is that he knows the protagonist. So it's not like reading about someone you don't know. But I mean, in your case, I mean, reading it from your perspective, what do you take away from it? What's important to you from the pretender?
Well, the first and foremost, one thing that I learned, the most valuable one is always do the right thing, no matter what. Do the right thing, regardless of the cost. You have to do the right thing, right? Having the integrity. And I think you demonstrated with action. Very few, I mean, I know in leadership, many talks about this, about, sacrifice, making, tough decisions, but doing it is a completely different situation. And in your case, it's at a much greater degree because you put yourself at a situation you could have been killed. They took a tremendous risk on your own life by try to save these people, and you did the right thing. So for me, that was a tremendous lesson, right? And plus, I know you as in my personal life. I know the kind of person you are. This is how you live your life. The second piece that I learned about that is that commonality, reading all these stories, that there's one thing in common in all criminals, right? They're all insecure. It's by design because the nature of business they're in, right? And the second thing is the greed. Almost every criminal enterprise, doesn't matter, it's a low-level thug on the street or mafia or terrorist, it's driven by greed. There's definitely that element is involved. And I felt that this was a tremendous lesson because it's applicable to business world and personal life, right? Because criminal enterprise or the criminals are not the one. They're not the only one who has a monopoly on being insecure, right? And I think it's extremely important in a personal life and a business and leadership to be able to observe and recognize when you're working with a peer, a coworker, or a business partner, or even a leader that's insecure, right? You really have to, you have to think your strategy differently, right? At this point, saying, okay, people that are insecure, they're also they're triggered very easily. That means you could manipulate them easily, right? And more I read about this story, that how well you were able to gain the trust, whether it's a Holy Land, whether it was in the trading floor, it's you were able to satisfy those two criteria immediately. And I know you talked about it, that you always put yourself in the criminal's shoes, right? Thinking, okay, what they are thinking, right? And I felt this was a tremendous lesson, right? I mean, being able to identify that specific trait of insecurity, because I think it matters not just in a criminal investigation for yourself, but I think in the business and leadership, because it's extremely important because we deal with different types of people. And anytime you recognize that trait, you have to know that, hey, this person could easily be triggered, and this person could easily be manipulated. So you have to also to position yourself accordingly. So that was another really good lesson. And the third one was, which I think I kind of talked about it in detail, and by the way, that I practice in religiously, is the value of preparation. I mean, I don't just prepare for any business meeting, any customer meeting. I over prepare, and I have been doing this for the last 2.5 decades, right? So, and I think, and you showed that in action in this book, the value of preparation, and I think that also helped me a great deal building relationship. Closing some of the most successful deals in my career, right? So, absolutely. I think those are the three things as a takeaway for me. And I want to say thank you. You have been a good friend, a good mentor, and I learned a lot. And I think this book is amazing. Apart from the entertainment value, which the lawman story is always exciting, but I think there's a tremendous lesson to be learned for business leaders, sales leaders, anyone trying to sharpen their business skill. There's a lot of anecdotes in there, and a lot of the stories has a good a relevance to the business world. And I think people will, our viewers will benefit from that.
The characteristics that you refer to, and these are things I've always admired and respected in your makeup and your personality, is your ability to identify what the right thing is and to do it, and also to prepare. As you say, preparation is really of overwhelming importance, and being able to know the individual, whether it's a competitor or a client, whether to really study them, know them, and to try and think like them. If you can think like them, then you can, this is something I realized, that, dealing with subjects in some of these early on in these undercover operations, is that I just had to figure out what buttons needed to be pushed. And if I could, perhaps it was an ego, large ego. You have to have a large ego, I think, to be an undercover agent. But
You have to have a good large ego. Is that what you
yeah,
said?
because you have to have, you have to believe that you're capable of all kinds of things.
Okay.
But what I was thinking what I would think, and I still think it may be true, it is true, is you get to know the individual well enough, you can identify what buttons have to be pushed in order to get that person to confide in you. And so, that really is a lesson that applies to your viewers as well. Is
Absolutely.
you identify what the buttons are, and then how to push them, and then you're going to win that person over. And the other thing, the maybe closing thing, if you want to mention, it has to do with ethics. Working as an undercover capacity with all different types of cultures, I learned a lot about different ethical standards, and being able to have confidence in your own ethics and maintaining your own ethical framework, despite what you may be faced with in your day-to-day dealings, whether it's as an undercover or in a business or corporate capacity, gives you the resilience to be successful, and not to become corrupted yourself.
Absolutely. Mark, this is truly insightful. I really enjoyed this conversation, Mark. So before we conclude, I have to ask, what's next for Mark Ruskin, and what's next for The Pretender? What's happening?
Well, I've tried to draw some of the essential skills that I've developed over the years and apply them in a current setting. So, I do keynote speaking. As if someone looks me up on LinkedIn and some of the other media sites, there are speakers bureaus that I work with, and I try to pass on some of the lessons I've learned, whether it has to do with ethics or other aspects of the work I've done. The also expert witness work. I've been applying some of the skills I've developed in that kind of situation as well. And then, as you mentioned, I'd also like to work. I have a novel in the back of my mind and another nonfiction book.
Oh, wow.
And so these are all things that I'm working on.
How about some advisory consulting for the movies and TV series?
Right. That's something I've been getting involved with as well, is providing for exactly just for movies or TV shows or other types of entertainment which are trying to depict uh, law enforcement or police type situations, to provide advice as a consultant on how these things are really done
Yeah.
in the real world.
Excellent. And as far as the book, I know that I'm excited that now it's being released in, and is it only in France or French-speaking countries?
No, right now it's no. That's a good question. No, all French-speaking countries.
Okay, and it'll be released in French
It'll
language.
be in France, in Switzerland, in French-speaking Canada,
Okay,
Guadeloupe, wherever people, Senegal, wherever people speak French.
excellent. So to all my Quebecois
Will
friends
read
in Montreal, please look out for this book. This is, I promise you, you'll find it exciting.
Le Caméléon.
I know there was some discussion, and you're talking to some of your buddies in Hollywood. What's happening there?
That's another. I don't want to jinx it, but there's some projects in the which you know in the world of entertainment, until it's done. So, but
Okay.
with a little good luck, and then or maybe a lot of good luck, perhaps there's going to be some viewable version of the Pretender or Le Caméléon as well.
I think it'll be amazing. I mean, I read, by the way, this is my second time reading the book, and I had as much fun as I did the first time I read it, and I think it'll be amazing. Whether, I don't know what they decide, whether they want to go with make a mini series out of this, or they want to make some sort of a documentary. I think regardless which direction it goes, I think the substance is there, right? So I think, I wish you all the best. I truly hope that it does that. I'm also going to be looking forward to your, next books that you're going to be writing.
Great.
Yeah. So Mark, listen, thank you so much.
No, it's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here, because I know it's very difficult to, find some time in your busy schedule. So I wish you best of luck, and I hope I see you soon again. All right, so to our audience, thank you all for joining us today.
Great.
If you like our content, please give us a like, a thumbs up. Please subscribe, because that helps us with the Google algorithm and YouTube. And by the way, this book, Pretender, it's available in Amazon. It's available in Audible. Where else? Where they can buy it?
I think any website that sells books,
Okay.
Barnes and Noble or Books a Zillion or Amazon or
Excellent. Yeah, or you could simply Google search it. You could just type in Mark Ruskin FBI, and you'll see The Pretender comes up. Also, you could search it just by the name The Pretender. You'll be able to find the link for this book. It's an amazing book. Check it out, and thank you for watching and listening. Have a wonderful day.